National Catholic Register. This is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
A ceasefire began January 19th between Israel and the terrorist group Hamas in Gaza after 15 months of fighting. We bring you analysis of the latest developments in this tenuously calm moment in the Middle East. Then we discuss the historical highlights of President Donald J. Trump's first week back at the White House. And finally, we remember the anniversary of Roe v. Wade as we reflect on the ongoing quest to change hearts and laws in favor of unborn human life. I'm Jeanette DeMello, host of Register Radio. I'm joined by Matthew Bunson, my co-host of Register Radio, and EWTN News' vice president and editorial director. There's so much news to discuss this week. For many months, there's been talk of a ceasefire in Gaza, and this week that's finally happened. We have with us Alberto Fernandez, a former U.S. diplomat and a contributor to EWTN News. Alberto, it is so great to have you back.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be on with you.
So you wrote an article for the Register this week, the beginning of the week. It's titled, "In the Middle East, Many Truces, But Little Peace." Can you describe the fragility of this moment in that region right now?
Yes. We're coming out of, obviously, more than a year of war. We've seen in the short term, late last year, a ceasefire in Lebanon, and of course this week, this past Sunday, a ceasefire in Gaza. So there's some progress. The guns have stopped for now. Suffering people are getting some support and some help, but it's all very, very tenuous. Politically, militarily, security-wise, there's nothing that's ended. It's basically a pause that many people, many diplomats and others are going to try to make permanent or extend, but we're in early days, both in Lebanon and in Gaza.
That's right, and you also spoke of Syria in that same article, and there are Christians in each of these places. How are they faring right now?
Well, I mean, they're hopeful in the sense that there's a momentary respite in all three places. There's a terrible civil war in Syria has ended, and there's the Assad regime has fallen, but Christians are very concerned about the future, concerned about what kind of rule they're going to be living under. They're hopeful, but also maybe a bit skeptical. And you could say the same thing in both Lebanon and Gaza. People are relieved that the fighting has stopped and that they can begin to rebuild their lives. But they're concerned about the uncertainty of the future, of what holds for them and their families in a region which has been in tremendous turmoil for so long, and which has basically caused these Christian communities to really become much, much smaller than they used to be.
Absolutely, and I think you ended your piece at the Register at ncregister.com talking about Pope Francis's Jubilee year and the fact that it's based on hope. And I think that we have to take that hope and apply that Christian virtue there in the Middle East as well, especially with our prayers. Thank you so much for always covering this for us.
Thank you.
We're going to turn now to President Trump's return to the White House. Matthew and Shannon are there in the Washington, D.C. studio. Peter Laffin joins us by phone. Matthew, I want to bring you in now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're also absolutely correct that President Trump, what we're calling, I know at the Register 2.0, 45th and 47th president, he hit the ground running. And Shannon, I know that we're dedicating the print edition coming up for January 26th to this very topic, right?
Yes, and Peter Laffin, who's joining us, contributed a lot of information there, really breaking down some things that Catholics in particular can expect from this new Trump administration. But Peter, on the heels of that, I was rereading a piece that you wrote back on July 19th, History in a Blink, 3 weeks that shook politics in the U.S., This feels like 9 years ago, but briefly, at that time, your 3 weeks at that point started with really just disinterest in the campaign, a rematch between Trump and Biden, and then all of a sudden things started happening. So those 3 weeks that you mentioned included Biden's disastrous debate performance, the GOP altering its abortion plank, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and the selection of J.D. Vance as Trump's running mate. Biden hadn't even got out of the race yet. That piece, Peter, if you remember, included the saying that there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks when decades happen. So, but we're living through one of those weeks right now with Trump. What are some of your takeaways from this busy week?
Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting reflecting on that time in the summer. It really was the Joe Biden disastrous debate performance. It seemed like this news accelerant. And it feels like we've been in an accelerated news cycle ever since, with so much change, so much forward movement. The first week of Trump's administration has been one of those times where one of those weeks where decades happen. And we're all feeling the shock and awe of that right now. We're all absorbing all of these changes that are coming so rapidly. For me, though, what stands out, I think there are two issues that stand out from Trump's first week, where we're stepping into a new territory where things are going to change so fast. It's going to be very important for journalists, especially good Catholic journalists, to keep up. And the first is immigration. We've seen some sweeping executive orders signed by President Trump regarding immigration. And for Catholics, we're really stepping into the dark here. We don't know. It's difficult to say, perhaps more difficult than ever on this issue, to say for certain which policies Trump is proposing or that he signed through executive orders are in accord with the moral guidelines set out by our church and which ones aren't. We know, for instance, he signed an executive order striking down birthright citizenship, where he's probably going to do something along the lines of not allowing Social Security numbers to be issued to children who are born in the United States so that they can't get automatic citizenship. We know, for instance, the Catholic Church, the U.S. ECB, has a specific teaching on that, and that right now the Trump administration is not in accord with those policies. But for the rest of it, how the rest of it goes, it's really hard to say. There's so many conflicting interests. There are truly innocent people, including children, who are enmeshed with criminals. And we're going to have to do the incredibly hard work of picking out the wheat from the chaff, as it were. And we're going to have to rely on our church officials to help guide us, teach us, what are we doing here that is morally illicit and what isn't. And so that's one area where we're just in a brand new world. And the other is with the strike down of DEI. Donald Trump has signed an executive order that is removing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs throughout the federal government. And just today we learned that many thousands of government workers tried to sign into meetings, tried to show up at work, and there's nothing there. And that's another area we just don't know. We don't know what this looks like. It's all brand new. So those are the two big ones for me for history so far this week.
Yeah, Peter, you mentioned the U.S. bishops, and a lot of people are looking to them to provide some guidance as to this flurry of executive orders. Can you talk a little bit more? Because I think some observers were surprised at how swiftly the bishops were responding to the executive orders after some questions as to how aggressive they were going to be with this new administration.
Yeah, one of the benefits of having somebody like Donald Trump as president is that he's been telegraphing this for a long time. This is exactly what Trump campaigned on. He said on day one, remember obviously the famous line he gave, which was totally misused by the mainstream media, that he was going to be a dictator on day one. But what he always meant by that was he was going to sign a flurry of executive orders on the first day and the first week. And so it seems that the U.S. ECB has given this some thought, and they knew which issues coming in and which they were going to ignore and which they were going to act on, which they were going to comment on. And three specific areas where they want to at least begin the process of communicating to the American public, communicating to American Catholics, the moral, the moral guidelines from these things. You have immigration, which I just mentioned a minute ago. You have the environment. Trump has signed an executive order to drill, baby, drill. And you're taking care of our environment, obviously. It's a very high priority of this church under Pope Francis. And the third is the death penalty, where Donald Trump has signaled he's much more in favor of it than Joe Biden has been. And so in these three areas, the USCCB has come out in strong opposition to President Trump. And we're just going to have to see how that goes in the months and years ahead.
Yeah, Peter, to follow up on that, obviously issues like the death penalty and immigration fall within certainly Catholic social teaching and Catholic moral teaching on prudential judgments. And yet we also recognize abortion as an intrinsic evil. What steps do you see coming in the short term with this administration on the issue of abortion, given the fact that he did sidestep or attempt to nuance his position on this?
This is another area where there's still so much is shrouded in darkness. It's difficult to say exactly what Donald Trump's position on abortion is. We got some clues early on, though. In his executive order on gender identity, which he just signed the other day, there was the inclusion of the phrase beginning at conception, meaning that it was in the context of we know that you are either male or female from the point of conception. But just having that language in a federal order that somebody has a characteristic as important as sex, that we know that at the beginning of their life at conception, it gave the impression that, well, okay, this president and this government believes that life does begin at conception. However, that conflicts with past statements Trump has made where, he believes in certain exceptions for abortion. He has signaled that he thought 6 weeks was too short of a window for a woman to be able to have a legal abortion in the state of Florida. So it's hard to say exactly where he's going to come down on this. We know that J.D. Vance is going to speak at the March for Life next week. And so that's a signal that also seems positive in the pro-life direction. But with Trump on abortion, he's very difficult to pin down. And that's a challenge that pro-lifers are going to have during his entire presidency. How do we keep him in line? How do we call him out when he stepped out of bounds? Do we feel comfortable enough to break our loyalty to him to speak up? That's going to be the big challenge for pro-lifers in this administration.
Well, and he does seem to have surrounded himself with a lot of Catholics.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, his cabinet is chock full of them. And he, as we know from covering the campaign, he became suddenly very open to and friendly with Catholic symbolism. Speaking about the Catholic faith, he had a pretty highly regarded performance at the Al Smith dinner. And so, we can hope that the good Catholics in his company begin to rub off on him.
And I'm jumping in here. We're just about out of time, but I do want to point to the editorial that is in the January 26th edition. This is a time of hope, and this speaks about, I think, some of the hope that we do have in this administration, even if we do have to hold the Trump White House to the fire on a couple of points. And I also want to point to a wonderful piece that is on the website right now. It's getting a lot of attention at ncregister.com. It's called Why Prayer at Presidential Inauguration Should Not Be Political Endorsement. And this is by Father Raymond D'Souza. Really great content. Shannon and Peter, it's always good to have you on Register Radio. Peter, we're saying so long for now. I know you're moving on to another writing position, and we have been so grateful to having you at the Register, and we wish you the best.
I appreciate that so much, Jeanette. It's been a dream come true to work for EWTN. There was a time, I'm sure, where I was EWTN's biggest fan, and everybody here is as wonderful as you could possibly hope. So thank you for saying that, and to everybody in the audience, thank you so much for your support.
So you've been listening to Register Radio on EWTN Radio. We will be talking next about the March for Life and changing hearts on the dignity of life and one woman's conversion story. Stay tuned to Register Radio here on EWTN.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
Welcome back. I'm Jeanette DeMello, host of Register Radio, together with Matthew Bunson, my co-host and EWTN News' Vice President and Editorial Director. We're joined on the phone today by Angela Copenhaver, the founder of We Teach Think, a company that aims to inspire people to value and protect everyone, born and unborn. Angela, it's so good to have you on Register Radio. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
So this week, tens of thousands gather in Washington for the 52nd Annual March for Life. We're speaking the day before the march, so we can't talk about how it's going or what happened there, but marchers typically to show us, they witness to the dignity of human life, and they show their commitment to always working for laws and policies that protect the unborn. That's what we hear year after year when we talk to the people at the march. You've attended the march before, maybe not this year, but you've been there. What does marching for life mean to you?
Well, I tell you, the first year that I went to the National March was just 1 year after I started We Teach Think and HumanFromDayOne.com. And I just wanted to get down there to be in the mix of, just this national witness of what it means to protect life. And it was just absolutely awe-inspiring, seeing all of the young people down there saying, we are the pro-life generation. There were hundreds of thousands of people. So when you stood at one point during the march and you looked down the street, it was just solid people as far as you could see. And then you turn your head the other direction, solid people as far as you could see. And sometimes I think as pro-life people, we feel like we're on an island and there's nobody else that thinks the same way that we do, or that we're the minority. And when you're in that environment and you see hundreds of thousands of pro-life people really proclaiming that life is valuable at all stages, it's just awe-inspiring.
Yeah, you're a convert to Catholicism, but you're also a convert to the pro-life movement. I know for a good part of your life you staunchly supported abortion. What changed your mind, or perhaps we could say your heart?
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting story, and thank goodness that God is so patient, because even though my Catholic conversion was very profound and led me to actually go work at Spirit Catholic Radio, an EWTN affiliate in Nebraska, it didn't really make me pro-life. It just kind of moved me to the middle. So prior to becoming Catholic, I was very much a pro-choice person. I did not work for Planned Parenthood. I did volunteer for them over a number of years, and I certainly was a donor of theirs. So when I became Catholic, those two things did not go together. But there was a period when a volunteer brought me the 40 Days for Life book to read. And, when she handed me the book, I was like, oh, thank you so much for bringing me this book to read. I really love to read. But in my brain, I was saying, I totally don't want to read this because I'm just ignoring this topic now. I'm just going to focus on evangelization. But God had a different plan. So when I got to chapter 33 of that book, it was called Take It Personal. It was about a grandmother whose granddaughter was scheduled for an abortion at the facility in Helena, Montana. And it was over a period of years when I actually lived in Montana that I was volunteering for Planned Parenthood of Montana. So when the title was Take It Personal, I say to audiences all the time now, it should be titled Take It Personal, Angela, because I just had a real meltdown, honestly, when I read that, and thought to myself, oh my gosh, what have I done with my poor example, and who have I led away from Christ with not only my actions, but my money? And what do I do now? So that was the first instance when I, had my first pro-life inkling that I needed to do something different.
Absolutely. And you have done something different. The way that you and I got in touch was that one of the Register's writers, Patty Armstrong, has written for us for a very long time, wrote a piece profiling your work. I loved the title that was on that piece because I think it's very appropriate for this moment in our country. And it's titled Meeting in the Middle on Abortion, Proclaiming the Pro-Life Message to Receptive Hearts. And this is about the work that you are doing now. Can you share with us how you reach men and women who maybe call themselves pro-choice or are just in the middle on the abortion issue?
Right. And, the estimates that we've done is approximately 59% of the United States population counts themselves in that. They're the people that say things like, I don't believe in abortion personally, but who am I to tell somebody else what they can and cannot do? So they're a good majority. And when I started doing the research, I found that a lot of pro-life dollars are being spent on what we call abortion-determined individuals, people that are actively seeking an abortion. And that's a very important thing. We need to do that. We need to continue to support that kind of work. But I found that there really was not a lot of activity trying to convert those middle-minded people to what I call pro-life market share. I spent the majority of my secular life working for a very large transportation company and in sales and marketing. And, I was always teaching that you need to not only maintain your current customer base, but you have to spend time, money, and energy in your potential customer base. And if you don't, your competition will. And that's what's been happening over the past 50 years, is that the pro-abortion marketing machine is very good at marketing their product to that middle-minded group. So I set out to develop a nationwide marketing campaign that would start where they are. It's the same that we do with evangelization. You have to start with where the person is and then help them follow the steps to find Jesus in their own heart. Well, the same thing is true with the pro-abortion marketing that they have. We need to do that also to try to grow the pro-life market share.
Angela, have you found that there are particular messages that have been particularly poignant, that have actually, from experience, have registered with that audience?
Right. And, one of the things that I call it the $1 million question, if you want to, start a conversation at a party, just start asking people, when do you believe human life begins? And so if you ask a pro-life group of people, they will all shout conception immediately. If you ask a pro-choice group of people, when does human life begin, they will tell you after the child is born and can sustain life on its own. However, if you ask that group of middle-minded folks, when does human life begin, you will get answers like 8 weeks, 12 weeks, heartbeat, feels pain. And that's because they've heard that repeated message over and over and over again until it becomes a fact or truth in their brain, even though it may not be a fact or truth. It's just called, that repetitive information. The familiarity effect is what it's called. So, I knew that we had to start with where they are. And that's why we named the website humanfromday1.com. I don't use the word conception in any of our advertising because it's already a learned trigger word for them to stop listening. So that's why we use day numbers instead of weeks, months, or years. It bypasses that already learned information that they have and actually makes them stop and listen to the information that you're providing.
Absolutely. I've looked at your website. I've looked at these billboards that you have in so many states. It is around the country, right? How many billboards do you have now?
Wow. I would have to stop and add them up. That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that question, but we're in several states right now. Honestly, our goal is to have them in all 50 states. And when I designed the advertising, I actually designed it after other national campaigns that were done that took something that was socially acceptable and moved it to socially unacceptable, like the Keep America Beautiful campaign, Smokey the Bear, seatbelts, drunk driving. All of these things were at one time socially acceptable and now are socially unacceptable because people understand that that activity is dangerous for both the individual and society. But the one thing all of those campaigns had in common is that they had a consistent nationwide message.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And we are supporting that same message and will continue to do so at ncregister.com. I invite all our listeners to go to ncregister.com to look at news, analysis, and commentary. Thanks for joining us on Register Radio here on EWTN. Until next week, on behalf of my producer, Michael McCall, my co-host, Matthew Bunson, and myself, Jeanette DeMello, I pray that God bless you.